Deep within the Vatican's secret archives, among documents never meant to see the light of day, lies a story so disturbing that even the highest echelons of the Church prefer to pretend it never happened. This is the true story of the Vatican Blood Pact, a cursed oath said to have been sealed in the darkest cellars of the Holy City, involving members of the high clergy and rituals that defy everything the Church officially believes. Imagine for a moment the Roman catacombs, those labyrinthine tunnels that stretch for miles beneath the eternal city. Now, imagine even more secret, even deeper passages that connect directly to the Vatican's underground. It is there, far from prying eyes and devout believers, that one of the most sinister episodes in ecclesiastical history is said to have occurred. A ritual that involved not only sacred words but human blood spilled over ancient scrolls, sealing a pact that transcended the barriers between the world of the living and the world of darkness. The discovery of this conspiracy stems from fragmented accounts from Vatican employees who, over the decades, witnessed unexplained events in the sacred corridors. Librarians reported books moving on their own in the early hours of the morning. Security guards swore they saw hooded figures walking in procession through the pontifical gardens on moonless nights, and members of the clergy who mysteriously disappeared after questioning certain internal practices of the Holy See. The Vatican Blood Pact was reportedly conceived during a period of great turmoil for the Catholic Church, when external pressures threatened not only papal authority, but the very existence of the ancient institution. Desperate cardinals, facing scandals that could destroy the Church's reputation forever, reportedly met in secret to invoke forces they believed could restore lost power. But every invocation has its price, and the price of this particular pact was sealed with the most sacred and profane liquid at once: human blood. Apocryphal documents, allegedly removed from the Vatican's most secret archives by dissident officials, describe ceremonies where black-robed cardinals recited prayers in archaic Latin, words that were not part of any known Catholic ritual. These prayers were allegedly written on parchment made of human skin, inked with blood and other ingredients that Christian morality would never approve. The objective was clear: to establish a pact with entities that promised to protect the Church from its enemies, guarantee its global supremacy, and eliminate any opposition to papal power. But as with all stories of dark pacts, the consequences went beyond what the participants ever imagined. Witnesses report that after the ritual was performed, strange phenomena began to occur throughout the Vatican. Centuries-old paintings began to exhibit mysterious alterations overnight. Saints depicted with distorted expressions of horror, angels with eyes that seemed to follow the observers, crucifixes that inverted themselves. The participants in the blood pact themselves began to display erratic behavior, as if something beyond their own consciences were influencing their decisions. The question remains: did this Vatican blood pact really happen? Could it be that deep within the Holy City, far from the eyes of the world, members of the high clergy really engaged in rituals that contradict everything they publicly preach? And if so, what were the real consequences of this cursed oath for the Catholic Church and the world? These are questions that the very walls of the Vatican seem to whisper when the night wind blows through its secret passages. To understand the magnitude of what allegedly occurred in the Vatican's underground, we need to examine the alleged participants in this blood pact. We're not talking about minor clerics or administrative officials, but rather some of the most influential figures in the Catholic hierarchy, men who possessed access to the Church's deepest secrets and the authority to make decisions that would affect millions of faithful around the world. The most persistent reports point to the participation of at least 7 cardinals, a number that is not coincidental within Catholic and occult symbolism. The number 7 has profound significance in both traditions. It represents divine perfection in Christianity, but also ritual completeness in esoteric practices. These cardinals were reportedly selected not only for their hierarchical position, but also for their specific knowledge of apocryphal texts, dead languages, and ancient rituals that the official Church had banned centuries ago. Among the alleged participants are figures who controlled strategic Vatican departments, the person responsible for the secret archives, the person who oversaw papal finances, the person in charge of diplomatic relations with world governments, and the cardinal responsible for the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Ironically, the same department that historically combated heresies and occult practices. The participation of these specific men suggests that the Vatican Blood Pact was not an impulsive act, but a carefully planned conspiracy involving the Holy See's most sensitive centers of power. Fragmented documents describe how each participant had to contribute not only their blood, but also specific elements for the ritual. The cardinal in charge of the archives reportedly provided medieval parchments written in languages predating classical Latin, texts that supposedly contained invocations copied from grimoires that the Inquisition had confiscated from condemned magicians and alchemists. The cardinal in charge of finance reportedly contributed objects of incalculable value, solid gold chalices that had belonged to ancient popes, sacred relics that had been desecrated to serve the dark ritual. But the most disturbing element of the accounts is the description of how the blood was collected and used. Each cardinal allegedly made deep cuts in his palms using a blade forged especially for the occasion, a dagger made of holy silver mixed with meteorite iron, materials that, according to occult tradition, possess special properties for establishing connections between different worlds. The blood was collected in a black marble basin secretly extracted from the Roman catacombs, a vessel that had been used in pagan rituals long before Rome became Christian. Participants reportedly recited oaths in unison, pledging total loyalty not only to the Catholic Church but also to the entities being invoked through the Blood Pact. The exact wording of these oaths remains a mystery, but witnesses who claim to have heard echoes of the ceremonies through the underground passages describe a language that blended ecclesiastical Latin with much older dialects, possibly Aramaic or even languages that predate known civilizations. What makes this story even more disturbing is the reported fate of these participants after the pact was made. According to the same sources describing the ritual, several of the cardinals involved began to exhibit dramatic changes in their behavior and physical appearance. Some developed unexplained aversions to traditional Christian symbols. Others began speaking languages no one could identify in their sleep. And at least 2 were reportedly found dead under circumstances never adequately explained by Vatican authorities. Did these men truly believe they were protecting the Church through extraordinary means? Or were they corrupted by ambitions for power that led them to betray the very vows they took when they became servants of God? The truth may be buried with them in the Vatican's secret mausoleums. The description of the ritual itself is where the accounts of the Vatican Blood Pact become truly astonishing. According to documents allegedly leaked by former Vatican officials, the ceremony took place in a special chamber secretly built underground beneath St. Peter's Basilica, a room that doesn't appear on any official map of the Holy City and is accessible only through passages known to very few people. This ritual chamber was reportedly prepared specifically for the Blood Pact, with architectural modifications that challenged traditional Catholic aesthetics. The walls were clad in black marble secretly imported from quarries that, according to legend, were cursed by ancient pagan cults. In the center of the room was a circular altar made of volcanic obsidian, a rock that possesses special properties in both alchemical tradition and darker occult practices. The altar was positioned to align with specific constellations during certain times of the year, following astrological principles that the Church officially condemns, but that some of its scholars secretly studied. Engraved on the obsidian surface were symbols that combined Christian iconography with much older elements. Inverted crosses intertwined with pentagrams, distorted angelic symbols representing fallen entities, and inscriptions in alphabets that predate any historically documented civilization. The chamber's lighting was provided exclusively by candles made from a special wax, secretly produced in the alchemical laboratories that supposedly still operate in the Vatican's basement. This wax was no ordinary one. It had been mixed with elements that included ashes from heretical texts burned during the Inquisition, oils extracted from plants that grow only in ancient cemeteries, and other ingredients that Christian morality would never approve of. When lit, these candles produced a yellowish light that created dancing shadows on the walls, giving the chamber an atmosphere that was simultaneously sacred and profane. The ritual itself followed specific steps that had been carefully planned, based on apocryphal texts and esoteric knowledge accumulated over centuries by the Vatican's secret scholars. First, participants performed an inverted purification, where instead of cleansing themselves of sins, they symbolically embraced the darkness necessary to establish the pact. This purification involved bathing in holy water mixed with cemetery soil, a practice that represents the union between the sacred and the profane. Each cardinal was then asked to recite specific confessions, not of their sins, but of their deepest desires for power and control. These confessions were delivered not in traditional Latin, but in an archaic version of the language, mixed with words from Aramaic and other ancient dialects believed to possess greater invocatory power. The goal was to establish a spiritual connection with entities that, participants believed, could offer protection and power in exchange for absolute loyalty. The climax of the ritual occurred when the participants' blood was mixed on the obsidian altar, creating a liquid that was used to write the text of the pact on special parchments. These parchments were not made of ordinary material, but of human skin prepared using medieval techniques that had been secretly preserved in the Vatican archives. The text of the pact was written using an ink made from the participants' mixed blood, combined with mineral elements extracted from meteorites and ashes from Christian relics that had been desecrated specifically for this purpose. Throughout the ritual, participants reported experiences that transcended normal physical reality. Visions of shadowy entities walking among them, voices whispering promises of power in incomprehensible languages, and sensations of presence that confirmed that something beyond the material world was being invoked through their actions. The Vatican Blood Pact was not just an agreement between men, but a contract established with forces operating beyond the limits of known reality. If the accounts of the Vatican Blood Pact are true, the consequences of this dark ceremony were not limited to the direct participants, but spread throughout the entire structure of the Holy See, like a spiritual infection that fundamentally altered the nature of the Holy City itself. Witnesses report that in the days following the ritual, unexplained phenomena began to occur with alarming frequency, transforming the Vatican into a place where the sacred and the profane coexisted in disturbing ways. The first signs of supernatural influence manifested themselves through alterations in the artwork adorning the apostolic palaces. Maintenance workers began noticing that centuries-old paintings exhibited subtle but unsettling changes during the night. Saints depicted with serene expressions awoke with distorted expressions of terror. Guardian angels appeared to have their eyes turned downward rather than heavenward, and painted crucifixes occasionally appeared inverted, as if unseen forces were manipulating the sacred art itself. But the manifestations weren't limited to visual representations. Librarians in the secret archives reported that ancient books began to display alterations in their text overnight. Pages containing traditional prayers would appear with altered words, transforming blessings into curses through subtle but significant changes in the Latin language. Medieval illuminated manuscripts developed additional illustrations not created by the original monks, demonic figures appearing in the margins of sacred texts, occult symbols appearing among traditional floral decorations. The participants in the blood pact themselves began to exhibit transformations that went far beyond the psychological. Cardinals who were once known for their exemplary devotion developed inexplicable aversions to central elements of the Catholic faith. One was reportedly found repeatedly attempting to remove crucifixes from his private residence, claiming the images caused him physical pain. Another participant began speaking in unknown languages in his sleep, uttering words that linguists could not identify as belonging to any known human language. Even more disturbing were the reports of physical changes. Some participants developed marks on their skin that resembled the cuts made during the ritual, but which appeared and disappeared spontaneously, as if the blood pact continued to manifest itself through their bodies long after the initial ceremony. Others began to display extreme sensitivity to sunlight, preferring to conduct their activities during the nighttime hours, a behavioral change that did not go unnoticed by those who had known them for decades. The most frightening phenomenon, however, was the disappearances. Vatican employees working in the areas near the underground passages where the ritual had supposedly taken place began vanishing without explanation. Night guards patrolling the lower corridors simply didn't return from their rounds, leaving only their uniforms neatly folded in places no one remembered seeing them. Some were found days later in a catatonic state, unable to explain where they had been or what had happened to them during their absence. Witnesses who stayed in the Vatican during this period reported the constant presence of an oppressive atmosphere that seemed to emanate from underground and gradually spread throughout the structure. The air seemed denser, especially during the night hours, and many reported disturbing dreams involving hooded figures walking through the sacred corridors, performing ceremonies that mirrored the original blood pact ritual. The Vatican's very architecture seemed to have been affected. Once familiar corridors began to feel longer at night, staircases developed strange echoes that had not previously been present, and some doors that had always remained open began to close on their own, creating passages that led to places that should not exist according to the official maps of the Holy City. Did the Vatican Blood Pact really open portals between worlds, allowing dark influences to penetrate the heart of Christianity? The evidence suggests that something fundamental had changed in the spiritual nature of the Vatican itself. Uncovering the truth about the Vatican Blood Pact becomes even more complex when we examine the extraordinary efforts that were allegedly made to cover up any evidence of its existence. According to sources claiming access to privileged information, a massive cover-up operation was implemented immediately after the first signs that the ritual had produced uncontrollable consequences. An operation that involved not only the destruction of documents but also the physical elimination of witnesses and the creation of alternative versions of events. The first step in this operation would have been the complete isolation of the ritual chamber where the blood pact was made. The room was sealed using construction techniques that ensured that no unauthorized person could find it, even if they knew its approximate location. More than simply closing off access, the chamber was buried under tons of special concrete mixed with elements believed to have spiritual containment properties. Holy salt in industrial quantities, fragments of pulverized sacred relics, and earth from cemeteries consecrated by ancient popes. Simultaneously, all documents related to the ritual were gathered and destroyed using methods that went beyond simple burning. The parchments used in the pact were subjected to processes that included dissolving them in special acids, incineration in ovens fueled by holy flames, and scattering the resulting ashes in the running waters of sacred rivers. The goal was not only to eliminate physical evidence but also to ensure that no spiritual trace of the pact could be recovered or reconstructed by supernatural means. But perhaps the most sinister aspect of the cover-up operation was the fate of those with direct knowledge of the Vatican Blood Pact. Lower-ranking officials who had witnessed strange phenomena were transferred to positions in remote monasteries, where isolation ensured their stories would never reach the public. Some simply disappeared, with official records indicating transfers to missions in distant countries, though subsequent investigations were never able to locate evidence that these missions actually existed. The ritual's participants themselves faced fates that varied depending on their level of cooperation with the cover-up efforts. Those who agreed to maintain absolute silence were gradually removed from prominent positions, receiving honorary titles that kept them within the Vatican structure, but without access to sensitive information. Others, who showed signs of mental instability or attempted to reveal details about the pact, were reportedly committed to specialized psychiatric institutions, officially for treatment of stress related to their ecclesiastical responsibilities. The official version of events created by the cover-up operation attributed all the reported strange phenomena to a combination of mass hysteria, structural problems in the Vatican's ancient buildings, and misinterpretations of natural events by superstitious officials. Detailed reports were produced to rationally explain each supernatural incident. Paintings that appeared to shift were attributed to temperature and humidity variations affecting ancient pigments, and strange voices were explained as acoustic echoes caused by drafts in poorly ventilated corridors. Experts in various fields were discreetly consulted to provide plausible scientific explanations for all reported phenomena. Psychologists analyzed participants' reports of behavioral changes and classified them as symptoms of post-traumatic stress caused by extreme professional pressures. Architects examined claims of structural changes in buildings and produced technical reports attributing any anomalies to foundation problems related to the building's advanced age. But perhaps the most compelling evidence of a cover-up operation is the very pattern of how information about the Vatican Blood Pact continues to emerge decades later. Documents appear sporadically, always from anonymous sources, always fragmented, always impossible to fully verify. It's as if someone or some force is gradually allowing the truth to emerge, piece by piece, defying efforts to keep the secret buried forever. The question remains, who or what is behind these gradual leaks of information? Could they be former participants in the Pact seeking redemption through confession? Or are they darker forces benefiting from the gradual revelation of the truth? We've reached the end of our investigation into the Vatican Blood Pact, but the full truth remains shrouded in mystery, like shadows that dance eternally through the secret corridors of the Holy City. What we've uncovered so far are fragments of a much larger story, pieces of a dark puzzle that may never be fully assembled, but which reveals enough to show us that the Vatican holds secrets far beyond what any believer could imagine. The evidence we analyzed, fragmented documents, testimonies of missing employees, reports of supernatural phenomena, cover-ups, paints a disturbing picture of an institution that publicly preaches divine light, but may have become involved with forces of the deepest darkness. The Vatican Blood Pact represents not just an isolated episode of spiritual corruption, but possibly a pattern of behavior that questions the very nature of religious authority in the modern world. But should we really believe these accounts? Did cardinals wearing red cassocks, symbols of the blood of Christ, really shed their own blood in rituals that contradict everything the Church stands for? The answer may lie not in the literal veracity of every detail, but in what these stories reveal about the anxieties and suspicions surrounding institutions of power that operate with extreme levels of secrecy and absolute authority. The Vatican has always been a place of extreme contrasts, artistic magnificence coexisting with spiritual poverty, ancient wisdom coexisting with willful ignorance, proclamations of holiness masking scandals that shake the faith of millions. The Blood Pact can be seen as a perfect metaphor for these contradictions, a story that captures the tension between the divine and the diabolical that defines the human experience of the sacred. Regardless of the specific historical veracity of the events we describe, the cultural and spiritual impact of these narratives is undeniable. They raise fundamental questions about the nature of religious power, the corruption of sacred institutions, and the possibility that those who present themselves as intermediaries between God and humanity may, in fact, serve very different masters. The Vatican Blood Pact taps into primal fears about spiritual betrayal and secret commitments that can determine the fate of innocent souls. For those who continue to investigate the mysteries of the Vatican, our journey is far from over. Secret archives continue to hold documents that may never see the light of day. The underground chambers of the Holy City conceal passages that could lead to even more disturbing discoveries, and former officials who know the truth remain silent, protecting secrets that could shake the foundations of global Christianity. If you've made it this far in our investigation, you likely share our fascination with the dark mysteries surrounding one of the most powerful institutions on the planet. I invite you to continue this journey with us on the Hidden Vatican channel, where we explore other equally disturbing episodes in the secret history of the Catholic Church. Watch our video about the secret archives that have never been opened, or discover the truth about the exorcisms the Vatican prefers to keep secret. The Vatican Blood Pact may be just the tip of the iceberg of a much more complex and sinister reality, operating in the shadows of organized faith. Every leaked document, every emerging testimony, every unexplained phenomenon reported brings us a step closer to fully understanding what truly happens when spiritual power becomes corrupted beyond any possibility of redemption. The truth is out there, buried beneath centuries of secrecy and cover-up, waiting for investigators brave enough to challenge the authorities who prefer to keep humanity in ignorance. Do you have the courage to continue seeking these hidden truths, even knowing they could completely transform your understanding of the nature of the sacred and the profane in our world? The Vatican Blood Pact stands as a grim reminder that not everything that presents itself as sacred is actually divine.